a box. What's in there is
Mhm.
a humanoid robot, which I've ordered from China, but I haven't unboxed it yet.
I got all the words. It's just it
Yeah.
became a little bit chaotic at the end, but
Maybe that's a bit the essence, right? Just having the words is sometimes
Yep.
not enough. You need to have the understanding. And our hope here is also to, have a new perspective. I think a second horizon and starting something new from a European perspective here on China. We're gonna bring some signals to the beginning each time. So in a short format, 30 seconds each. Pascal, why don't you go ahead and tell us about what signals you've got this week that we can later on dive into?
So we're looking at China kind of like, we should look at China because we can't only look at the US, but that's not the good reason to look at AI when it comes to China. And so I think that's a signal that there's a lot of happening in AI land in China these days. I just had an idea, and I think maybe Europe should do what Deng Xiaoping did in 1978 or 79, is basically just say, okay, we're going to bide our time and be a lot more humble and learn from the rest of the world.
Pascal, the first recording of Second Horizon. There's plenty of information around China, lots of headlines, but we believe there must be a little bit more depth in the discussion and sense making of this. So I guess Second Horizon adds another layer, right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to this podcast because I truly believe, too many people are looking at the first horizon. Immediately what we see and hear from most media, and we're missing a lot of things that are behind the horizon. And looking at the second horizon is exactly what I think you and I have been doing for years when it comes to China. So I'm looking forward to have this discussion in this podcast. Going to be fantastic.
Exactly. And I think we want to change things. I don't know if you have seen it. I just made this LinkedIn post. I'm trying to read it. It's in my broken Chinese. It's let's see if you can get it. It's 革命是从你自己开始的，鸡蛋从外面打开是食物，从里面打开的是形成。I don't know. It's like revolution begins with yourself, and egg cracked from the outside is food, and cracked from the inside it's new life. I should have rehearsed that a bit more, but basically,
I got all the words. It's just it became a little bit chaotic at the end, but
maybe that's a bit the essence, right? Just having the words is sometimes not enough. You need to have the understanding, and so we want to dissect some of these things, and I think that's just literally a topic for organizations, for Europe, for private persons, frankly, like to start from within and breaking some boundaries and creating something new. Like our hope here is also to have a new perspective. I think a second horizon and starting something new from a European perspective here on China, I guess. And that's why our format was gonna be like this. We're gonna bring some signals to the beginning each time. So in a short format, 30 seconds each. Pascal, why don't you go ahead and tell us about what signals you've got this week that we can later on dive into?
Yeah, there's a lot of signals. What happened the last weeks related to China has been crazy. For me, the biggest signal is China's back on Europe's radar. Mm-hmm. And it's back on Europe's radar because everybody's visiting it, everybody's talking about it. But I do believe the noise to signal ratio is still very high, meaning there's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of concerns, a lot of worries, and I don't think we're always looking at the long-term trends that are happening and the changes that are happening. But a big signal. Another one that I had, which I think is all related to AI. We're talking about AI everywhere in the world, but I do truly believe that we still do underestimate the regulation and the steps that China is doing in terms of AI. So we're looking at China kind of like, we should look at China because we can't only look at the US, but that's not the good reason to look at AI when it comes to China. And so I think that's a signal that there's a lot of happening in AI land in China these days. And then also the third thing that I had as a signal, which is not related to China, is pretty much all the deals that Europe has signed with India, with just last week with Mercosur. Now they have with South America, things that take 20 years, and then suddenly within a week everything can be resorted. And so I think that's a huge signal that Europe is looking for a way out. And I think we should put that in context. Otherwise, we're going to just read the noise that, yeah, we're trying to do things to get a solution from what we're dealing with the US. But there's actually a new world happening, and Europe is starting to take its first baby steps in that new world.
I like how you kind of start with the big picture here, like this very macro. I think if I go into mine, they're a bit different. By the way, just for context for everybody, so Pascal and I, we both, our daily businesses around China. So we scan the news, we have projects going on. So sometimes those signals will be deriving out of what we currently are doing, or sometimes it's about, what everybody is already discussing. So yours been very, very big, in my opinion. Mine, maybe I've got one that I can contribute here that we could possibly merge into one discussion. So I start off. Number one is that the USD has created, like the US dollar is on a downturn. I mean, Trump really wants that, but in some ways he couldn't be happy with what's currently happening, and markets are being reacting strongly to that currently. So you touched on it. We need to discuss that multipolar world, America becoming a bit more of its own pole, Europe as well, I guess. And I think that's pretty much where new alliances are forming, and we need to discuss it because everybody's talking about it. The second one is a bit more niche because I'm doing a lot of automotive stuff, and everybody knows about Chinese EV, but I have got a very concrete example now, which is about that now China is banning the Tesla door handles. If you heard about that. So
I heard
these are
about
those EV door handles where some people have been involved in accidents and couldn't grab it right in time, so it's become a safety issue. But for me, the analogy here is a bit bigger, or the why it matters is a bit bigger, because European automotive companies are big in China, and in the end, now this is a sign for how China is shaping the world. Like Chinese standards, Chinese safety protocols, all of that is really pushing into Europe in the end, because it could decide our door handles in Europe, if you will. So that's not, by the way, it's not a Tesla specific issue, but to everybody. But still, I thought this might be an interesting signal to discuss. But as I said, a bit more.
It links to the AI regulation that I talked about. So
Exactly.
I think that too. I mean, us in Europe underestimating the regulation happening from China. So yeah, completely agree with that.
Yeah, and that's possibly about my third signal, which is a new space, robotics. So I've been to Milan last week. The first Chinese launch of a humanoid robot in a European capital, if you will, or a European big city, so on European grounds, has been happening. I don't know if you can see that, but in the back there's also a box. What's in there is a humanoid robot, which I've ordered from China, but I haven't unboxed it yet because I just came back. But anyways, my signal here is, so I think we're sort of where the EV revolution has been 5 to 10 years out, so early stages, but it's interesting. It's happening in Italy. It's happening now the way it happened. I think that's worth discussing also in this whole context of AI and legislation that you mentioned, because obviously there are lots of black boxes and question marks around humanoid robots, especially coming from China, and how Europe will deal with that, I guess. So yeah, these are our signals for today. You've got a favorite to pick on, Pascal, to
well, to be honest, I like all three. So we're going to have to make a choice. But when I look at your three, I think the robot thing, I've been predicting this for about a year or two, and I think it's very much linked to automotive manufacturers, which are very much going into humanoid robots, also because they can use it in their factories. So I think it's a very interesting topic, because it really changes the whole perception of how to build products from a lab or just in the market. And I think China is a good example there. So I like that. The door handles, I think that's just one topic. I think if we start talking about Musk and Tesla, we could probably talk for hours. So I think there's a lot of things happening there. But I do believe that that in EV land, regulation, specifically when we're going to go to self-driving, is going to be very interesting to see how the US and China are playing out. The first one, I think anything related to the multipolar world and the new world being created, I think I like that one maybe most, although I'm just like you, I'm watching technology.
No, let's go into that. I like it because I think that's kind of very related to your expertise, and you know, you're very senior in this. You know everything from probably following a much longer time than I have already. How do you view this whole thing unfolding? I mean, we've been talking de-dollarization for a long time, and it's never really happened. So is it just another flaring up of this topic, or do you think it's this time for good?
Well, I think it's a very interesting topic because a lot of people been talking, just like you said, about de-dollarization, and other people are saying, no way. I mean, the American dollar is never going to be not the number one, because I mean, what's the alternative to a reserve currency compared to the US dollar? On the other hand, if you look at trade, you already see very much that much of the trade that China is doing is now more than half of it is doing in its own local currency or with other currencies and not in US dollars. So you see a transition in trade. You don't see it in a reserve currency. But interesting enough, Xi Jinping, if I'm not mistaken, just yesterday or the day before, was announcing that, somehow he wants to become, he wants China to become a reserve currency nation. And that's like, I mean, mind-boggling, because I mean, if the currency is not completely convertible, I mean, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
You need an account. The accounts need to be willing to actually take a negative, and that's something that the US is totally okay to have a trade deficit, but and an account deficit. But will China be willing to do that? So with all that surplus, I don't think it's going to be easy. But I think it signals something bigger.
Do you buy it? Like, do you think he's really wanting to become the reserve currency, or do you think it's also maybe we need to consider this could be part of the negotiations that are going on? You know, Xi and Trump are going to be meeting in April. How do you see it? Is it just something he says publicly to exert pressure, or do you think China intrinsically wants to become a reserve currency status?
Well, I do think. Yeah, I do think China wants much stronger capital markets, and I think that's also a topic that you follow very closely. So I do believe that China wants to have its stock exchange and everything much more solid, and be able to actually be a player in the capital markets on a global level. And what you also see is the trend that many countries are now really concerned about the US dollar's position and the debt that the US is keeping, and can they repay? So a lot of people, it's always interesting that a lot of people are always saying, but China has a lot of problems. But then on the other hand, I mean, if you would take that same lens on the US economy, in a way you could say, well, the US is going to go bankrupt, and basically that could happen fast. I mean, these are all doom scenarios which are unlikely to ever happen. But the fact that Trump is really going to the extreme in testing out what's possible and not possible is putting a lot of strain on the economy, and as well on the financial and capital markets, and stock exchanges go up, go down. It's not all related to AI, it's related to a lot of things. And so I think China is hedging its bets. I think that's what it's about. I think it's like, if everything goes south, at least we're going to be there. So, I mean, it would be stupid for China not to have a position in case that everything goes belly up, which of course nobody today believes, but nobody even believed that the US and Europe, as strong allies, would ever have a problem working together on topics.
Are you talking about the past here, like strong allies? It's calmed down a bit, but like if I watch the last couple of weeks, we've been talking of the US taking over a part of Europe in a sense with green debt. I mean, and that's playing into the de-dollarization as well. I think one of the reactions wasn't it that Denmark or some other countries, or Belgium also even suggested to selling some of their US debt, right? So, I mean, China must be sitting here watching and just say, okay, do nothing, be winning. Like that's what they can do right now.
So I completely agree, but I think we have to look back at the past and see how we didn't see this thing happening with Trump and everything that basically now we're looking at China, we're looking at other countries in India, in South America as new partners, new friends, because basically Trump and the US have completely changed the world order, which is very ironical because everybody was worried that China would be creating a new world order, and it's actually Trump that is putting the machine in motion. And I think if we look back at that past, I do honestly believe that we should also look at what happens if the dollar just doesn't make it like it always have since the Second World War. Then suddenly, I mean, that could potentially happen, and I don't think it's a scenario that many bankers are actually considering, just like we weren't considering that probably Europe would completely change in perspective of the US. So I think we should at least consider it. And I think that's what China's doing. They're seeing that was one of the options. And because that is one of the options, they need to be ready with capital markets that will attract investments to China, and maybe even a reserve currency if like they say, they are the stability factor in the world. I mean, not on the capital markets, but definitely it could be an alternative if everything goes belly up.
I'm trying to throw in a little bit of nuance here because on the one hand side, I agree with you and totally with the capital markets. I think I've just made a video about the fact that I think China's manufacturing a slow bull market. So they really want to copy the Nasdaq QQQ type of success model that people get more and more wealthy through investing in 401k, pension funds, that type of schemes, and has worked really well. And we see that, China is going out of property and popping that bubble. So I agree with you. Strong capital markets, but on a USD, and that's why I asked your opinion on. Do you think it's just talk? I'm not entirely sure. So whether or not China really wants have a reserve currency status, because in my experience, how I always perceive China is also they really just like to be a little bit more inwards and don't want to have all of these external responsibilities. That's usually what you also get in some of these trade negotiations. For example, do whatever you want with tariffs, right? We've got this huge internal market, or we can we want to deal with everybody basically. But really, I think that would be a big change if China starts to be more outgoing and says, look, guys, we want to take the leadership here. We want to have the reserve currency status. So I'm a bit worried about, not worried, worry about the situation here, and saying I don't really think they're pushing for that status yet, although definitely they have some of their own issues around property and trade and sort of that things. But how do you see that?
No, I agree, and that's what I was saying. I don't believe that is their goal. I think it's kind of like a way, because then they would have to change their system, and that's not China, something China likes to do very easily. So I don't think that's their goal. I think they're more than happy to have the US being the reserve currency. They probably would like to have the Europe and other places also be more currency strong in the way that it's not just all the US, because that's often used against them, that power of the dollar. But I do believe that China is just playing their cards right now, and just saying that already sends a message that we're not going to just stand by, and we're going to actually be part of that new world. And that new world includes the capital markets, includes the dollar or the reserve currency market. So they want to be part of it. But I don't think China wants to play a leadership role in that, because that would create a lot of liabilities that they probably wouldn't want. So I think we're in agreement on that part. But I do think it's a big signal. And for me, what I think is also interesting to look at is how investors now these days are more and more looking at China since a couple of weeks, 2-3 months, despite all the the news that you get, and that's all the noise that you get constantly, like Xi Jinping with the 2 generals that were fired or basically put aside, and there's no more generals left except for the one who's been firing.
Do you got
all of
any
them or getting
intel
rid
on
of them.
that? I frankly didn't read up too much onto it, but
No, but I think it's an interesting chapter because again, when I got that news, I mean, you can't believe how many people sent me a message on WhatsApp or on Messenger and said, yeah, so is Xi Jinping and is the Communist Party going to fall? Is this a coup or what's happening? And so I couldn't follow the amount of rumors that week. It was like more rumors more noise than anything else. And it was like, yeah, there was nuclear secrets being given to the US. There was like, it was because he didn't want to the general didn't want to invade Taiwan. And I mean, all these rumors. And I was like, wow, it's like we're all back to 5 years or 2-3 years ago, where it's all about something happens and then we expect China to fail, to basically completely collapse. And I think that's in that same area that we're too much looking at the downfall and not seeing that this is actually a process that Xi Jinping has been going on for 10 years. But it shows you that investors have not, for the first time, when they see all that news and they hear all these rumors, and I mean, that should be a panic, but it hasn't been.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big signal. I think this is not about noise. The fact that the investors are just keeping to look at China and look at what's happening in Hong Kong, in IPO land and all these things. And I mean, there is interest in the Chinese market, and all that rumors, all that geopolitical news, it doesn't affect them as it did. I mean, during the Biden era, during the pandemic, I mean, that was terrible. I mean, everybody was scared of what's going to happen in China. Now it seems people are like not as scared anymore, and they're waiting to see the news happening. But of course, the rumors remain, and that's fun, but it's noise.
Yeah, I actually didn't even look into it because I've seen these rumors in the past. They come every now and then, but actually most of the time nothing happens. But so I just notice it. But maybe I think that was your second signal or another signal, right? About all of these, not only the investors, but also the state visits, like the politicians now going back to China. Any thoughts on that? Like, why would you say this is something new and emerging now? Is it the number of people going, or the way they are meeting, or the outcomes? What do you see there?
Well, yeah, a little bit of everything. I mean, there's been the Prime Minister of the UK, of Canada, so Starmer, and then it's been the Minister of Canada, who's been ultimately Carney going to the, I think it was a few weeks ago, and then from Finland, Orlo, and ultimately I think Mercer's going as well, end of this month. So it's one after the other. Now, all these things are planned, of course, somehow. But for the UK, it was 8 years that there was been a prime minister going to China. So I think that's a big difference. Canada, I mean, there's been so many issues with Canada and China over the past 5, 6, 7 years. From Huawei's daughter, Ren Zhengfei's daughter, to the 2 Canadians that were imprisoned, and I mean, you name it, and lobster and other wars that they had. so I think Canada was probably the first one that made a U-turn, and clearly said, also at Davos when he did his speech, it was very clear, like, yeah, this world order that we've created, or basically the rules-based order, he said very clearly, is something that is kind of invented by the West, by America, by Europe. And it's the first politician that said it out loud. I mean, and that means that it's not an international order, but it's somehow that he feels that the current order that is being held is not viable in the new world that is being created. And the interesting thing is also the outcomes. If you look at all of their visits, they came back and got a lot of comments back home, like, yeah, you're just switching the US for China, and I mean, China's not going to save us. I mean, we shouldn't do that. Specifically in the UK, I mean, the Tories were having fun time. It was all about, yeah, this is not okay. and you didn't get a really good deal. And so, but I think we're missing something. I think we're missing the fact that this is not about the US is not our best friend anymore today, so we're going to look for a new friend out there in China. I think it's more than that. I do believe that the real signal here is that all of these politicians have started to realize that there is no second China. And that you can, of course, if you lose your best friend, which is the US in terms of economy, in terms of financials, capital, all these things, in terms of security, then somehow China comes on the radar. You can't not have China on the radar. You can talk about India, about South America, all these things, but that de-risking idea that we had for many, many years, I think is dead. I think that's what these politicians have realized. And of course, back home, there's a lot of politicians who are still at that, yeah, we should really de-risk from China because China's the big risk. But now today, the US is also becoming the big risk. And so the interesting, should we hedge China against the US or the US against China, is becoming a very interesting debate. But we're not seeing China anymore as the only big risk on an economic level. Now the US is as much. And I think that's what's the real signal that I've seen from all these visits.
Which could be a really great position for Europe. Like once you realize that this is the new situation, you could play it on both sides, really.
Yeah.
So,
but do you think that Europe should actually play both sides, or play against the other, or should they basically try and get the best deal from both sides? But a little bit what India's doing, they're just signing deals with everyone. What should Europe go into more deals and try to just become a broker, or should they actually be more like a player or a referee and saying, well, if you don't give me that, I'm going to give it to someone else? I mean, it's two very different positions. I think it's an interesting debate.
Yeah, I've got maybe a more tech-centric view on that, meaning like it's not time to really think about tech sovereignty and really do what China has done quite some years ago, almost decades, right? If you think about China, the tech ecosystem is so different. I mean, yeah, the negative is that's because of the Great Firewall, but I mean, it's just showing that's built intentional, right? They didn't let in some of the US companies to take over, let's say, the financial transactions, the chat messages, and all of that, which is basically data in the end, and now feeding into this AI revolution as well. So lucky for China in a sense that they have done so, because it really made them quite unique in a sense how this ecosystem is being built, and they have got their own set of problems with monopolies and so on, but that's exactly what we don't have at all, right? We're now thinking about fining US big companies, or in this whole AI theme emerging, we still feed the data, and we don't have our own solutions. But so I think that's kind of the homework that we could make in the first place, where I don't think it's about deal making. It's more about really building something in Europe and learning from both sides. So like, why is the US so great and fast with the capital, with innovation, with the mentality is a big thing, deregulation, and I think you also mentioned that on another call about EU Inc. How you think that's a big step, so we can talk about that. And then, learning from China is also a big part of my daily basis in business, what I'm doing. Like, how can we think about the Chinese business models, how they're different, and how do you build such ecosystems? So, long story short, I think the tech part is really something very, very substantial right now that we need to do aside of the whole politics and use the reserve currency and stuff, because like you said, the risk is not only China when it comes to rare earth or other things like supply chains, but also on the US side, we cannot be naive. Like, what happens if there should be some sort of an invasion, and that doesn't need to be even militarily, but what if there is some big problem around Greenland again, and we're running on AWS and those type of services that they and if you look out there are some US tech CEOs saying like, hey, we should maybe put a bit more pressure on the Europeans because we have this leverage. So I think in the first place, do the homework right. And I see a couple of startup and investor players acting on that now, starting to act on that and saying like, look, we need this euro maxing position and building something from scratch, and also market and sell ourselves better, which by the way I think both the US and China are really good at, and on marketing themselves, although on China with some question marks, like they're also not very successful when they go overseas and going into other markets. That's something we could talk about in the future as well. But yeah, so I would say the essence, I'm really optimistic here for Europe with this whole scenario, how it's now unfolding, much better than 3 years ago. But I feel like the basis needs to be done right at this point, and that's something like
I agree.
The tech. Yeah.
So I think it's the basis that needs to be rebuilt, the foundations, and I think that's the wake up call that we're getting. I mean, I just had an idea, and I think maybe Europe should do what Deng Xiaoping did in 1978 or 79, is basically just say, okay, we're going to bide our time and be a lot more humble and learn from the rest of the world, whether it's the US or whether it's China. It doesn't really matter, specifically when it's about technology. And then silently, basically just building our own autonomy, but at an enormous speed. If we could do that, maybe in 10 or 20 years from now, we will again be that power that is really standing there. And I think right now the problem is that we're heading more and more into a direction, which the US is also heading to, where we see nostalgia as being the way forward, meaning we need to go back to that great Europe and be autonomous and so on. But nostalgia is not a strategy in my view. I think we need to start building stuff and creating stuff. And indeed, I think we can use both China and the US as inspiration, as partners in building our own economy. And I do see a lot of good things happening. I mean, EU Inc., which I talked about some time ago, is just a small initiative. But I mean, it could become big, where startups could ultimately, wherever they are in Europe, wherever country they are, they could instantly just start their company and sell and expand to any country in Europe, and it would be deregulated completely. So now there's a lot of paperwork they need to do, bureaucracy, which doesn't help a startup to scale. So I think this is a good thing, but this is just one little thing, although it could be a big difference for startups, but it's just one small thing. And I think that's where Europe needs to act and to start building things. So I totally agree. So maybe we should go back to what Deng Xiaoping did 40 years ago and see how Europe, and I think that's, in my view, the most critical thing. I think Europe should become more humble in a way, but that doesn't mean not active. It means that they should be more active than before. In Chinese, there's a saying, I don't know if you know this word, wu wei. Wu wei basically means inaction. And inaction basically doesn't mean that you don't take action, but you actually do a lot of things, but it doesn't feel like you're doing things. This is typical martial arts kind of thinking. Use the other person's energy to actually avoid conflict and create your own energy. And I think that's what we need to do. But this is all becoming very philosophical. I think Europe should just build stuff.
No, but,
I think
but
it's as simple as that.
I think mentality is a big thing, because I think you just mentioned like knowing about the other side, like second horizon again. Like there is more than just the European side to it, and we need to expand our views. And I think that's one of the strengths of China, that they probably know much more about us than we do about them, and that comes also down to business when. From my experience, we can now go also ahead into maybe talking about EVs or robotics in the future. But, the Western companies, despite the fact they all have the offices in China, they sometimes don't even know what's happening there. And meanwhile, why are the Chinese so good at leapfrogging the technology? It's not this, what everybody's claiming China is doing is just copying. No, it's because they're learning a lot about us, and then they see where they can make it better. Like with EV, they know they couldn't compete with the Germans on the internal combustion engine, so they take a leap of faith and go into a new technology. Of course, Tesla has helped them, so they let in the US, a leading company there, give them a wholly owned company in China, something never heard of before. That makes the competition in China go massive and grow. And here we are talking about all of this overcapacity now, because it's just become a huge success factor. But then again, maybe coming back to EU Inc. And closing that part here, it's also always about scale in China. So not only the competition, but then you have this massive amount of people. You've got this huge country which is under one language, one authority, and that's a little bit maybe what we could create here in the EU as well, with not less EU in a sense, but a better EU in that you have less of regulation, more of a common market. We have 500 to 600 million people as well, and a huge GDP in that sense. And so a reason why China's moving so fast is part of that they have, first of all, they start learning, then implementing it, and then pushing it out at scale quickly. And that's, again, it happened with EV, it's gonna happen with robotics again. And so that really are some of the lessons that we need to learn and see how it works systematically, and then see what we can take over and learn and doing by ourselves in Europe, I believe.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the main topic that you're touching on is that we should not just look at the noise that we get from the top down from Beijing and their big plans. I mean, this is all very important, but if you talk about robotics, you talk about EVs. I mean, a lot of that value has been created by companies, by private enterprises as well, and a lot of startups that just were doing crazy things and just tried things out. And then indeed the whole Tesla thing was they're looking up at Tesla. They weren't looking down on Tesla when it came out. Same with Apple. I mean, so many Chinese, they love iPhones. I mean, they see it as an example, and that learning thing is something they learn in school. I mean, my daughter's been to a Chinese school, and I know exactly. I mean, she didn't survive there. She ultimately went to a bilingual school. It was a little bit too difficult. But if you look at the way that they learn in school as a kid, constantly to absorb more knowledge, and from every day you just get more and more smarter and better and better. This is something that's just in their education system, and it goes throughout the whole society. Even Confucius, 2,500 years ago, was the big teacher. And so I think we're underestimating the learning capacity of the Chinese, and we're overestimating the power that Beijing has to actually move the market. I think Beijing has an enormous power to organize the chaos of the markets. That's how I call it. And basically to put certain visions and plans and strategies, but mainly 5-year plans and big visions there, and that people see, wow, because Chinese are pragmatic. When there's a lot of money to be earned, let's go for that plan. Why make shoes if you can make EVs and make more money, or batteries? But I think the bottom up is really the signal that politicians are not looking at. I do see a big difference the last months in the business world, where they are looking more and more at the bottom up and innovation and technology and all these wow things coming out of China. But on a political level, there's still way too little interest in what's happening on the ground. And there's too much interest in what's happening basically on the surface, which is basically it's what the media is telling everybody. And as long as we look at it that way, I think Europe will actually be blindsided by the real power that China has, which is their learning capacity in an industrial environment that goes extremely fast. And it's ironical because China is looking up at Europe as being probably the best place for education in many ways. So China is looking at us like, wow, you guys really got it in terms of creating the best talent. America is better at attracting that talent, but we are creating a lot of talent. But then somehow we're not even looking at China and what they're doing with their talent. So I think that's a mistake.
I've seen that Chinese companies are now starting educating Europeans or Germans here, CATL, for example, vocational training for around batteries, engineering. That's an interesting shift as well. I don't know if you've looked at that, but China is actually adopting quite a few things from Europe when it comes to law, like the way the Chinese law works. It's very, very continental. Then the education and training, you mentioned it. They look up to it, and they have worked that in partly, but then of course the output is much different. Like if you look at the STEM force and all of that is totally different scale. And but again, maybe an opportunity some way. Maybe China and Europe can benefit from each other on that in the future. Again, in terms also of education and knowledge workers, or who knows, maybe they're gonna get replaced by robots entirely. I mean, that's possibly the Elon Musk moonshot.
Not
all. Didn't he say you don't have to do a medical degree anymore because there's going to be a humanoid who's going to be better than you?
Yeah, but for now, for the time being, I think we still have a lot of opportunity as humans. But I do think we're underestimating in Europe the knowledge that we have that China could use. And you're right. I mean, China's not just been copying products 20, 30 years ago. They've also been copying our management models, leadership models. They've been, even policies. But they've refined it, they adapted it to their local market, their local environment. And then they got this mass power of 1.4 billion people that are then executing this at speed and scale. And I think that's what we're missing very often is that speed and that scale that we're willing to do in Europe. But ultimately, it's not that the Chinese have come up with a completely new model on their own. They've been making a fusion of their model and our model and try to find something that works in a way. But they love somehow what we've created because it works. And so I do believe the educational part from Europe, whether that is purely in higher education or whether it's even in industries like elderly care and stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge transfer in agriculture that we could do towards Europe. So we're always thinking in terms of trade and products. We're often forgetting the services and how we could actually add a lot of value in that market, because China is becoming more and more a service country or service-based nation. It used to be less than 20% of its GDP was services. Now it's more than much more than 50%, over 60, I think even. Of course, in Europe, it's almost 80% in some countries. So we're almost a service-only nations. But that means that there's a lot of knowledge transfer that we could still do. And I'm not talking about intellectual property only. I'm talking about just how to do things and best practices. And I think that's where we're missing this learning curve that the Chinese are looking for, which could be a trade-off for other things that we want. So I think Europe has a lot more assets that they think they have. They're just looking in the wrong direction, in the wrong sections. They're always looking at protecting everything. And I think that's where we should start to realize that we're not going to protect the past. And if we want to only protect the past, we're actually going to not create the future. I think that's really the thing. We're just going to extend our lifeline a little bit, and then the boomerang effect will be much, much bigger. We will have a much bigger issue in 10 years from now. So yeah. very interesting times right now.
Yeah, I agree. And you talk about creating the future. Maybe I think one signal we possibly haven't touched on yet from your side was around AI, but maybe you can let me know if you still want to go into that, because just setting the scene here, I think we won't be able every time to go through each of these signals. Maybe some of them we will carry over. Maybe you guys, listeners, have some additional signals for us in the comment sections. That would be appreciated. And do we want to wrap this up here with another touch on AI? I mean, that's a huge topic, but maybe an outlook to what's coming in the next episodes.
No, I don't think. I mean, AI is a too big topic to just do in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
But I do think maybe two facts that I think I would like to just drop here is that China is now building its AI cloud in space, and I think that's a huge thing that is happening. So having computers in space orbiting around Earth, because you have sun there, you have, of course, cooling. So that solves the two big problems, energy and cooling of AI cloud centers. Of course, this is a 5-year plan, but knowing China, they're probably going to get there. I mean, there's a lot of problems in that area, but I think it's a cool idea. Musk is doing it as well.
Yep.
But I think this is another race that we're not watching very often, is the cloud in space. And the other one that I think is major, that we see now popping up every single day, is AI glasses. And this is just the glasses where basically AI capabilities are put in there to see prices of clothes, or to basically understand your environment, to do search, to do all these things. And the amount of companies now in China, like Alibaba, like Rocket, even automotive companies like Geely and Xiaomi, they're all building AI glasses. I've read somewhere that 80% of all the AI glasses in the world are going to be produced in China. And that today they have almost 30% of the global market of sales of AI glasses. So this is a huge new market, which I think, I mean, people at CES in Las Vegas, they're probably watching this, but I think most people are not. But I think this could be the big next revolution. Next to your mobile phone and your smartwatch, you might, in a year or two, all have AI glasses. And this is happening. So these are two facts that I just wanted to share, because I think it's at the beginning of a new trend that started in 2025, but is now 2026 going to take off.
No, I think especially the AI classes are super fascinating, because in a sense, I almost thought this AR, VR thing is dead, because there wasn't really good use cases. And as you say, it's now kind of flaming up again, and nobody's watching it because it went through this hype cycle. So usually it just has this first peak, and then everybody talks about it. And we had Facebook changing its name to Meta, and all of that. But the second life is maybe really just starting now with AI coming into the game here. So, and it's again happening in Shenzhen, I guess. But maybe also a fact I can throw in here. Some positive for Europe and China. I think lots of the glass, so the actual glass, will be made in Germany, because companies like Schott have like real advantages here on the technological side. So we'll unfortunately, we will not be the ones who are bringing the tech into the markets, because we don't have the tech ecosystems. That's what I meant before. But we first need to get up the basis for that and do our homework, because then we could also launch things like that our own. But the Chinese, they have it. They have the exports to the US markets. They have their own startups and big companies like Alibaba, who will be able to bring such technology to consumer and embed it into an actual ecosystem that makes sense. I think, you're right. Possibly us as innovation scouts, trend scouts, and China watchers on our next delegations and trips to China, we need to look into that space. And probably Shenzhen is the place to look for. Everybody's watching robotics, but thanks, Pascal. I think that's a really, really good gold nugget in here in this first episode of our second horizon today. And I think I'm going to conclude it here because I think that was off to a good start. Leaving outside my rusty and bad Chinese for now, but I think that was the spontaneity
we'll
that we
practice
wanted
next time.
that's because of the spontaneity that we want to create here, but we also want to get some certainty into this podcast, like the regular formats, like the pitches in the beginning, and plus in the future we would also introduce actual guest speakers or people that we should talk with. So there's going to be more than us, Pascal and myself, or maybe sometimes, really different faces. So that's something you can really look forward to. And we hope that you would find this insightful and valuable, and that you would subscribe to our new channel here and work with us on this vision to have some positive outlook here on this whole US, Europe, China triangle right now. Possibly there's much more to talk about. I mean, it's a real multipolar world now, and the emerging markets and the BRICS countries need to be part of that discussion in the future. But I think that was kind of off to the start here of what we are seeing and talking about, right, Pascal? Any additional thoughts?
Yeah. And well, maybe final thought is that I really am looking forward to doing this podcast series, because I do believe, I mean, every day, every week, I get people asking me lots of questions online or when I'm in front of an audience, and always wanting to know. And every week I'm giving kind of the signals, because the noise is just too big. And I think unless we uncover some, or at least discuss some of these signals versus noise situations, where people are so concerned about one thing, but forgetting that maybe there's other context or a China lens that they want to understand, or basically another side on the coin, and at least make up their own mind, I think it's difficult for people to read through the noise that we're getting these days. And so I invite everybody on this podcast and all the listeners to come up with their signal or noise, whatever they hear, and we can cover this, and this can become a dialogue. I would really look forward to not just having us to talk, but basically have the community to help us with what they feel is a big noise challenge, or the signal that everybody's missing. And if we can do that, I think this will be a podcast that I will be enjoying a lot every time we do it, because I think that will be very needed for most Europeans, but also people outside of Europe who are watching China. And even for Chinese, I think it could be very interesting to see how the world looks at China, and what the noise and what the signals are.
Exactly. And for us, Pascal, the challenge will be to do this regularly. So now we're in our cozy homes, but we'll be podcasting from everywhere we are, whenever it's necessary, and as many times as we can possibly do during our busy lives and schedules. So thanks for everybody for tuning in today, and really enjoyed this, Pascal. Looking forward to our next session. And again, please smash a like, be sure to be subscribed, and see you in our next episode.
See you next time.